Welcome to the Living Sephardi Heritage Series. We are tonight going to speak about the Gaon Chida. Who is the Gaon Chida? Why is he important to Sephardic culture, to Sephardic halacha, to Sephardic life? As we know throughout the Sephardic history, from the time when the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed until today, there have been a couple of great men who have changed the course of Sephardic history. And one of them, undoubtedly, was the Gaon Chida. Born around 1724, when his mother was 7 months pregnant, she gave birth to him. Right away, the beginning of his life, there was already a miracle. When he was born, they thought he was a stillborn. He was born at 7 months. Back then, they didn't have the technology we have today to put the child in an incubator, and they thought the child was dead. He was freezing, he was cold, his body was cold, and they left him. They left him for dead. They thought that they would have to bury him the next day, until his grandmother came to inside his room, and she felt that there was a small heartbeat, very faint, but it was there. And she right away covered him up, and she took her to herself, and she warmed up his body, and he came back to life. And they called him Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He came from a very illustrious family. They were originally from Castile, from Sfarad, Spain. And during the Spanish Inquisition, his family fled to Fez in Morocco. And from there, they made way to Eretz Israel. Already from a young age, he had a lot to prove, because his great-grandfather, not his grandfather like many people believe, but his great-grandfather was none other than the Bal Chesed LaAvraham, the Rabbi Avraham Azulai. To talk about him, we'll take another video in itself. Rabbi Avraham Azulai was one of the two rabbis who made a She'elat Chalom, a question while you go to sleep, and they asked none other than Rabbi Chaim Vital, Calabris, the student of the Ari Kadosh, whether they could undig in the grave one of the books that he hid, and he gave them permission. That was the great-grandfather of the Chida. Not only that, Rabbi Avraham Azulai was known for the famous story of going inside Ma'at HaMachpelah and coming out alive, saving many Jews in the process. So the Chida had a very strong lineage. He came from a family of very big Talmidei Chachamim. When he was a young boy, him and his friend were coming back from Cheder, and his friend invited him for a bowl of soup. And his mother went to the bazaar that day, and she bought a couple of greens, cilantro, kuzbara, anise, and she also bought a small nut called the balador. She didn't know what it was. She thought it was some kind of delicious nut, but it's poisonous. But if eaten in the right amount, could give a person near photographic memory. And the young Chida, Chaim Yosef David, he ate from that soup, and from that day on, Hashem opened up the wellsprings of his mind, and he had near photographic memory. In his lifetime, he wrote near to 83 books. 83 books! People these days, they say the Ben Ish Chai, another Rabbi Yosef Chaim, he wrote 50 books. The Chida wrote close to 83 books. Unbelievable. If a human, and he wrote that while traveling most of his life. The young Chida, he was a very tall man. He had a very strong countenance to him, and he always dressed to perfection. When he was in his travels to collect money for Eretz Israel, he stopped by France. And in France, he went to the king's castle because he wanted to visit the extensive library. The library that the king of France had was one of the most rarest books in the Jewish, what they took from the Jews, of course, from what they plundered during the pogroms, and they gave the Chida special permission, the one and only person in history, till then, the only person to be able to go inside the library and to take out books was the Chida, and he also saw many rare books, and he memorized them by heart in one day, and he would write them down. Many books we have today is only because of him. When the Chida was a young man, he learned under Rabbi Yonah Navon, the Baal Nechpa Bakesef. And already at a young age, he wrote a book proving, he was very big into Jewish history, and he proving who was the Rebbe and who was the student throughout Jewish history. And like this, he answered over 400 questions that rabbis had in Gemara, in the Rishonim, and in the early Acharonim. He also studied in the yeshiva of none other than the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And after that, he also studied in the yeshiva of the Rashash for Kabbalah. Legend says that the Rashash, when he saw the Chida when he was a young boy, when he asked him, "Teach me, Rebbe, I want to learn the Kabbalah, the mystical parts of the Torah," and the Rashash turned his face saying that, "I'm not going to teach you, this is not for you, you're going to reach this by yourself." But the truth is that this story is not true. In fact, the Chida was part of a small group of men that learned with the Rashash late at night. And under the Rashash is Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, who we made our first video about. Under his yeshiva, there was a wellspring, a natural ma'ayan. And we know that to purify one of the most biggest impurifications in Judaism, you need a ma'ayan, a natural wellspring. They used to dip there, do tikkun chatzot, and learn Kabbalah, the mystical parts of the Torah, till late at night. One night, they all got together, him, the Chida, the Rashash, who was much older than them, and Rabbi Chaim de la Rosa, the Torah Chacham, later to be known Torah Chacham, and they tried to use meditations, unifications to bring the Mashiach. Unfortunately, they were way too early, and it caused a hitback, and the Rashash died that year. Rabbi Chaim de la Rosa was stricken with poverty, and on the Chida it was decreed that he should go out to exile, and that's what he did. He went out and he visited almost all the Jewish communities in the world. It is unknown if he visited Bukhara, probably he didn't, but he visited almost every other country where the Jews lived. And they say a funny story when he went to Tunisia, where there was a very big, till almost not long ago, very big Jewish community, and they were very strong in the Rambam and in the Rishonim and in the Gemara. But they wouldn't learn many of the later rabbis. They would learn a lot of Rambam, Gemara, and they had a minhag. If the rabbi wanted to collect money, any rabbi, didn't know what the Chida was, there was no Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, news. So the rabbi would have to give a drasha. If they found what he said to be good, they used to give him money. But the problem was that when the rabbi would speak in Tunisia, you were allowed to interrupt the rabbi in the middle of his speech with questions. So the Chida, the day before, he prepared a very nice pilpul speech in the Gemara with the Rambam. And while he was giving his speech, the rabbis in Tunisia, they were throwing at him questions, very deep questions, intricate questions. And the Chida writes in his book, Magal Tov, that he couldn't find his footing. They had such questions that he didn't know what to do. So he went off the podium, almost embarrassed. And the next day they invited him to speak again. But this time he got prepared, because he knew that they didn't learn the later rabbis, the Acharonim. And this time he gave a speech and he mentioned rabbis they never heard before. And they couldn't tell him anything, and he shut them up, as they say, very beautifully and eloquently. When the Chida made his way to Livorno, to Italy, over there where he passed away, there was a very famous story. When he got to Livorno, which was back until the Holocaust, a very, very big Jewish community lived there, of Italian Jews, which were not considered Sepharadic or Ashkenazic, but Italian. And over there was a guy who came to the Chida and said, "I heard you're very smart. However, I think I need you to find me some kind of clue as to what to do." He said, "What happened?" "I think my wife cheated on me. I think she's a sotah, but I have no proof. I didn't see her do the act, but I know for a fact by witnesses that she went inside, and I don't know, there was one witness, two witnesses." So the Chida says, "Bring her in." And through his hindsight, he knew that she was guilty, but he had no proof, and the lady would not agree to take a get. Because we know from Rabbeinu Gershom, one of the 7 things that he made an excommunication on was that a woman cannot be divorced against her will, even though biblically speaking it was allowed, until Rabbeinu Gershom. So what did he do? The lady was very, very aspanim, she was very brazen, she put the Chida down, she embarrassed him, she said, "How could you paskin halacha for him to divorce me? Who do you think you are?" But the Chida says, "You know what, let me just do one thing." When he was a young boy, he remembered the Orach Chaim HaKadosh blessed him to have the power of a Kohen. So he took out a Sefer Torah and he read the parasha of the Sotah with the cantillations, with the correct vowels. And the second he finished and she heard everything, she was about to turn around and leave, and all the curses that it says in the parasha about the Sotah happened to her. And she fell down in excruciating pain. Exactly what happened to the Sotah happened to her. And it was a pele, it was a wonder to everybody over there. And Chida's name went out in complete bracha and countenance into the world. And he became even more famous. Another interesting story they say about the Chida, when he was in Pisa, in Rome, I believe, they brought him a young child. Also, he was born in the 7 months of pregnancy, and the child was very sick. When the Chida saw him, he started to sweat like he saw something extremely holy. And he looked at the boy at 7 months old, and he started to teach the child Aleph Bet, Aleph, and the child repeated Aleph, Bet, Bet, Kamatz, Patach, Zareka, all the cantillations. After he finished, he kissed the baby on the head, and he said, "There's nothing more I can do for this child." And the child passed away. A couple of weeks later, it was Purim, and in the middle of the Su'udah, with the happiness and the drinking, they were talking about Mashiach, how come Mashiach hasn't come yet? And the Chida said, if you guys only knew what you guys just missed. The Mashiach was among us. And they understood from his words that that child that passed away right after he was born at 7 months was the Mashiach. There's many stories we could say about the Chida, but one very interesting point I want to make about the Chida, which is also a very underlying concept about all Sephardic rabbis throughout generations. This is a series to learn not just about the stories about the Sephardic rabbis, but also who they were and how they acted. The Chida in all of his life, even though he was the giant of his generation, the Pnei Yehoshua, who was the Gadol Hador of Poland and Ashkenaz, he walked and he was melave him, he escorted him out, and he took a copy of his book. The Pnei Yehoshua. And the Chida never in his life took a position of being a rabbi. Never in his life. No matter how much they pressed him, no matter how much he needed the money, never in his life. And he always kept his loftiness hidden. There's many stories we could say, and maybe B'ezrat Hashem will do a part 2 on him. But for today, I want to say, guys, one last message. In the 11th of Adar, right before Parashat Zachor, is going to be his yortzeit. Please, everyone, light a candle. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen v'amen.